Article 6, Paragraph 3 of the United States Constitution reads, "The senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution, but no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States." Next on the Atheist Viewpoint. Hi, and welcome to the Atheist Viewpoint. I'm your co-host, Ron Barrier.
And I'm Dennis Horvitz.
And again, this is a program brought to you through the auspices of the American Atheists, Inc., www.atheists.org. Back when George W. Bush ran for president of the United States, one of the questions asked of him during the debate was, who is your favorite political philosopher? And, you know, the several candidates actually answered with real political philosophers. George Bush answered Jesus Christ. Of course, the press and everyone else was befuddled by that answer, and the only question that one could come up with was why. His answer, because he changed my heart. Well, what does that have to do with today's Atheist Viewpoint? Well, we fast forward now, and it's 2010. The presidential campaign is starting to heat up. And on the Republican side, we have such front runners as Rick Perry, Mitt Romney, Michelle Bachmann, among others. And especially those three, or especially Rick Perry and Michelle Bachmann, the candidates, and I don't know if, Dennis, what do you think, have shown now a propensity to bring up their religious faith in their campaign speeches. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, well, I mean, in the current political climate,
right.
And considering their target audiences, how can they not?
Rick Perry, a leading candidate for presidential office, pretty much connected with the apostolic movement or Reformation, an extreme right-wing Christian organization.
Right.
Michelle Bachmann, her husband Marcus Bachmann, she funnels taxpayers' money to his Christian counseling center,
to cure gays.
Who calls gays barbarians and then tries to cure them. So, and of course they do give a biblical justification for their actions. So Bill Keller of the New York Times in August, at the end of August, said, if a candidate for president said he believed that space aliens dwelt among us, would that affect your willingness to vote for him or her? Personally, I might not disqualify him out of hand. 1 out of 3 Americans believe we have had visitors, and hey, who knows? But I would certainly want to ask a few questions like, where does he get his information? Does he talk to the aliens? And do they have an economic plan? Yet, when it comes to the religious beliefs of our would-be presidents, we are a little squeamish about probing too aggressively. Michelle Bachmann was asked during the Iowa GOP debate what she meant when she said the Bible obliged her to, quote, be submissive, unquote, to her husband. And there was an audible wave of boos for the question, not the answer. And I think his next sentence is telling. There is a sense, encouraged by the candidates, that what goes on between a candidate and his or her God is a sensitive, even privileged domain, except when it is useful for mobilizing the religious base and prying open their wallets.
Right.
And I think that's a profound statement right there. Yes, they say, oh, you know, faith is private. Rick Perry, of course, would love to make the federal government inconsequential and make government that we don't even know it exists. Yet he would be the first one to promote Christian prayers in school using the enforcement of the government to do that.
Yes, yes.
You know,
And even worse, in the armed forces, which is a very big problem.
yes, that is a very, you know, and we have to get, who is it, Kathleen Johnson?
Kathleen Johnson, yeah.
Yeah, we have to get her on to talk about the infestation in the military and our armed forces of evangelical Christianity.
And hopefully Mickey Weinstein, too, if we could contact him. He was at Atheist Alliance International Convention a couple of years ago.
And wait, he's a serviceman?
Well, his son had just graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy, and he became involved. He was actually a Republican. I think he was in the Bush administration, I think. Anyway, in any case, not the first Bush administration, Reagan, I think. In any case, he was affiliated with some Republican presidential, and he noticed that all the intense Christian evangelism done in the United States Air Force Academy in direct violation of the United States Constitution, and he instituted investigations, and in fact it was found that that was true, that they had, members, officers in the Pentagon, officers, important military officers were appearing in religious videos in uniform, which is against the which is unconstitutional and against the rules of the military.
So would this give some credence to the Islamic fear that, in fact, there is a crusade against?
Absolutely, absolutely, blatant. No, blatant. These they were instructing United States soldiers to go over there for the express purpose of converting Islam. Converting Muslims.
Converting Muslims and to spread Christianity
and
while, while they're using weapons of destruction.
What other word could you use but crusade?
Interesting.
And all of this is in direct violation of the United States Constitution, Establishment Clause.
So anyway, and certainly you should get this article by Bill Keller, the New York Times. It's his opinion piece that he wrote, and it's called "Asking Candidates Tougher Questions About Faith." You can look it up and read the entire article. We're not going to do that. But someone had done a profile in the New Yorker of Michelle Bachmann, that her influences include spiritual and political mentors who preach the literal inerrancy of the Bible, who warn Christians to be suspicious of ideas that come from non-Christians, who believe homosexuality is an abomination, who portray the pre-Civil War South as a pretty nice place for slaves, and who advocate dominionism, which is the view that Christians and only Christians should preside over earthly institutions. And just to let you know, the U.S. Taxpayers Party, which is now called the Constitution Party, is in fact a front for dominionists. From reporting in the Texas Observer, which is something we spoke about with Rick Perry a couple of weeks ago, we learned that dominionist supporters of Rick Perry, including evangelists, to whom Perry gave leading roles in his public prayer service. So I mean, if candidate Obama was excoriated for things his pastor, the Reverend Wright, had said, and that McCain was forced to reject the endorsements of John Hagee, a Protestant preacher who offended Catholics and Jews, then he says, I don't see why Perry and Bachmann, and any others for that matter, should be excluded. So he starts off with a list of questions, which was in an addendum that he wrote for the Sixth Floor blog. Is it fair, and well, let's take a few of these, okay, and that's how we'll discuss them. Is it fair to question presidential candidates about details of their faith? From the strict constitutional point of view, no. Those questions should never come up. But they shouldn't use them. If they bring them out and now use their faith, is this a fair question?
I don't claim to be a constitutional scholar, but in fact, the questions actually are allowed to come up in public. The fact is, what is not allowed to come up is not allowed to be written into law that a candidate must be a certain religion to hold public office.
However, it's heavily implied.
Right, but you can actually, the question is whether it's pertinent, whether it's in the spirit, I suppose, of the Constitution. And as I said earlier,
I mean, personally,
If they're
I
gonna
don't
wear
care
the-
what a
but
candidate's religious beliefs are.
if they're going to wear it on their sleeve and they're going to make it very clear that that faith is an instrument of their politics,
which is
or the politics
discriminating
is
against certain American
or their
citizens,
politics is an instrument of their faith,
or anti-science,
right?
then
Yeah, because if somebody's anti-science, it really doesn't matter why they're anti-science. The point is that's inappropriate. It's against reality. It's or the best way we have of understanding reality.
It's an interesting question. Do you agree with those religious leaders who say that America is a Christian nation or a Judeo-Christian nation? And what does that mean in practice?
Yeah.
I think that's a fair
That's
question
a fair
because
question.
they brought
Absolutely.
it up. If you encounter a conflict between your faith and the Constitution and laws of the United States, how would you resolve it? And has that happened in your experience? Now,
that's a good question.
I think that's a very good question because it was noted that I believe Michelle Bachmann, that she went to, and I believe it was Liberty University, I'm not really sure now, that they taught that if your Christian faith comes up against secular law, you are obliged to challenge the secular law.
Right.
And, to fight so that you make it accommodate.
And I think that disqualifies them from holding public office.
I have to agree. I have to agree with you. Governor Perry commiserates with David Barton, the founder of Wall Builders, which is he's a historical revisionist.
He's a hysterical revisionist.
Hysterical revisionist. He has been proven to make up quotes and make up references that don't exist. He's also a big fan of Glenn Beck, so by indirect association, you have Rick Perry with Glenn Beck.
In politics, stupid works. That's what it was.
Well, it's funny they say that because when they have some of these so-called Republican spokespeople or spokespeople for the various individual candidates, they always try to temper their remarks by saying, well, they're addressing a specific base. Well, what does that mean? If you're going to be the president of the United States, you're going to be the president of all citizens,
That's right.
not a specific base.
That's right.
So I don't understand that. Here's another question, and we already know what Herman Cain would say. Would you have any hesitation about appointing a Muslim to the federal bench? What about an atheist? And we know that Herman Cain is throwing up all sorts of religious roadblocks because he's such a fervent Christian, and we know how Christian the black community is.
Look at just last month, Governor Christie came under fire for appointing a Muslim to a judge in the state Supreme Court.
That's right. And he said the guy knows the law and he took his oath.
End of story.
Right. And he says all this talk about whether that should be part of the this religious test for this public office, he dismissed as crazy talk.
Right.
And I applaud him. It is
right.
crazy.
I'm not a fan of Governor Christie, but
no, I'm not either.
But he generally got good marks from the left on that.
Now it is crazy talk, but to them, it's not crazy, and that's what makes it serious. Right. Because it turns it around.
If hypothetically this judge were to have said, "I'm going to make my decisions based on my understanding of the Quran," that would have been a legitimate reason to disqualify him. I think.
These are the same people. Every one of them, Dennis, that supported these laws and resolutions that passed in several states banning Sharia law when Sharia law didn't exist. Now, I'm for taking it, of course, a step further, and why don't we issue resolutions banning biblical law while we're at it and keep all supernaturalism out of our secular
and for that matter,
law domain.
Or for that matter, the Norse gods as well, too.
Yeah, keep it all out.
Yeah.
Are Mormons, here's another question he sent to the candidates, and they're not going to answer them. What do you think of the evangelical Christian movement known as dominionism and the idea that Christians and only Christians should hold dominion over the secular institutions of the earth? This is the goal of Liberty University of Jerry Falwell, the late Jerry Falwell, and this is the goal of Pat Robertson's law schools also, is to litter the landscape with Christian lawyers and judges and politicians to, in fact, affect this type of change.
Right, right. Actually, and even those, really lunatic fringe, the Westboro Baptist Church, most of those people are lawyers.
Yeah, that's right. They are, aren't they?
Yeah, most of Fred Phelps' people are lawyers. It's all his children and.
You know, the scope of the Westboro Baptist cult has expanded now to include the Archbishop of New York, the Roman Catholic Archbishop, Maggie Gallagher, a conservative columnist for the New York Post, and the Defense of Marriage organization here in New York. Because they all hate gays.
Oh, okay. So the Westboro Baptist Church has expanded its horizon? Is that what it has?
Well, apparently these other groups are joining them in this attempt to overturn marriage equality in the United States. So yes, I consider them kindred spirits now.
They have openly aligned. Is that the idea, or
they share the views openly?
Wow. No, because as far as I knew, the Westboro Baptist Church, Catholics were all evil and a cult, and they were.
That doesn't change the fact that they both share the same views about gay people.
So what I'm saying is that
they're philosophical kindred spirits. In other words, they don't realize it. Let's put it this way: the groups I just mentioned don't realize it, but they are all on the same plane when it comes to this issue. Right. What is your attitude towards the theory of evolution? Do you believe it should be taught in public schools? Well, both Michelle Bachmann and Rick Perry have frighteningly and not implicitly but explicitly mentioned that school children should decide for themselves. Now, that's crazy talk.
Yeah, I wonder if they let their children decide for themselves whatever they wanted to do. I don't think so.
I don't think so either. That's funny you said that. That kind of... Just to go off a second, recently the mandatory teaching of sex education has been reintroduced into the public schools.
Right.
And of course the usual hue and cry for the religious and you know, Hispanics and the black parents and all that stuff. They're all saying, oh, you know, there should be something that should be taught at home. I would like an informal survey. I have yet to find one person who ever learned about human sexuality at home from their parents. Right. Unless maybe you were the children of sexologists or people in the field of reproduction or anything like that that would have the intelligence to discuss that with you.
But for the
most part, I think kids learn about sex in the streets.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you this. In my case, I had the traditional father and son talk.
Mine was ridiculous. I could tell you about it.
I think I was 8 years old, and I'll be honest with you, most of what he said, which of course was correct, but a lot of it went right over my head at the time. Mm-hmm. You know. My
father waited till I was a little older.
Yeah.
In fact, old enough, like 13, that when he started with it, I noticed, my late father, by the way, I noticed how uncomfortable he was. And he was trying to use every euphemism under the sun instead of just speaking directly. And, you know, it kind of went nowhere, in one ear and out the other, because by that time already, and then I've come out of Catholic school, and we had an all-girl Catholic school in Bayonne, New Jersey, and an all-girl, all-boy Catholic high school in Bayonne, New Jersey, and we all got along just fine. So, really didn't need to talk.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, outside of genital penetration, virtually anything else you add is, depending on the age of the child, is basically just nuts and bolts science, really.
It is.
You know.
But you know what? I think we, in a way, and we'll get back to the candidates. Religion makes sex dirty. You know, one of the profound things that I realized how religion makes sex dirty? Washing your hands after you use the restroom. No. You should wash your hands before you use the restroom. You're clean. You took a shower that morning. Your hands are touching everything. That's dirty. Touching yourself is not dirty. But you still wash your hands before
Well,
and
it's
after.
the idea that sex being a bodily function,
Right.
like moving your bowels is a bodily function.
It's cleanliness. It's a matter of cleanliness. But you do it beforehand, too.
Yeah, that actually, involves, I think, a much larger discussion than we have time for.
Right.
But it would be interesting at some point to cover that.
Here's another question that Mr. Keller wanted to send. He did send, in fact, for Michelle Bachmann, very specific. You have said that watching the film series, quote, How Should We Then Live, unquote, by the evangelist Francis Schaeffer, that's Schaeffer, was a life-altering event for you. That series stresses the inerrancy, the literal truth of the Bible. Do you believe the Bible consists of literal truths, or that it is to be taken more metaphorically? You have recommended, as meaningful in your life, works by leading advocates of dominionism, including Nancy Pearcey, whose book Total Truth warns Christians to be suspicious of ideas that come from non-Christians. Do you agree with that warning? Last year, in a documentary produced by Truth in Action Ministries, you espoused the idea that the government is not entitled to collect as taxes more than 10% of a household's income, the amount Christians are called upon to tithe to the church. Is that a goal you would pursue? One of your mentors at Oral Roberts University, John Eidsmoe, E-I-D-S-M-O-E, teaches that when biblical law conflicts with American law, a Christian must work to change the law. Do you agree? Are there examples where the Bible guides you to challenge existing secular law? Another book you have recommended is a biography of Robert E. Lee by J. Stephen Wilkins, who contends that the Civil War was a clash between a Christian South and a godless North. He writes that in the South, contrary to the notion that slaves were victims, there was a unity and companionship that existed between the races because they shared a common faith. Do you agree with Mr. Wilkins?
Oh, that is such an insidious, disgusting lie. I mean,
Everyone,
that is
yes.
foul.
Now, but these are legitimate questions because this candidate has espoused these views.
Yeah,
and
that's what I understand.
And I think their feet should be held to the fire.
Absolutely.
It's sad that they bring it up because these are the same people who claim to be constitutionalists. They believe in the strict interpretation of the Constitution. Well, even for Rick Perry here, close to David Barton, that America is a Christian nation, we should have a government firmly rooted in biblical principles, and that the Bible offers explicit guidance on public policy. Or that Christians and only Christians should hold dominion over earthly institutions. That's his fellowship with the New Apostolic Reformation.
Yeah.
Well, to Rick Perry and Michelle Bachmann, I ask you, what part of no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States do you not understand?
Oh, they understand it all right.
I mean, it's quite clear. And if you look at the, if I may, if you look at the oath that they have to take, the president for office in the Constitution, doesn't it have? So help me God.
Right,
right.
It's not a requirement.
No.
Right.
So, our founding fathers knew what they were doing. Rick Santorum, in an interview with Rush Limbaugh, he described global warming as junk science and patently absurd, and accused proponents of being part of a plot to expand government control over our lives. Among specialists...
You mean like shutting down abortion clinics?
Among scientists who specialize in climate, it's funny you said that. I was thinking about the Defense of Marriage Act, and these state constitutions have these amendments about considering the proclivity of a lot of our elected officials to have been married more than once. I think maybe they ought to amend that to be the defense of marriage to be that a marriage is recognized in the United States between one man and one woman at a time.
At a time, right.
I think that would probably be more truthful and
more pragmatic, more realistic, yes.
All right. Here's another one for Santorum. With the proponents, yes, of the global warming being a government plot. Among scientists who specialize in climate, there is strong consensus that the Earth is experiencing a pronounced warming trend. How did you decide that on this issue you agreed with these scientific outliers, which usually are not legitimate scientists?
Right.
Also, is this an example of faith-based policy judgment? All right. Do you think cheating on a spouse disqualifies a candidate from being president? Well, that would clean.
No one would be running for office,
right.
basically.
You signed a pledge circulated by the family leader, an Iowa conservative group, promising personal fidelity to my spouse. I mean, these guys.
That's such grandstanding, blatant.
It is blatant grandstanding. The signing of these pledges, the wanting them to take, really was what is essentially a faith-based stand on public issues.
Right.
So the criticism of Keller was really unbelievable.
Yeah, it was right on. It was
you know,
by Keller, right?
And it's a shame because I think the editor of the New York Times brought up something which is cogent, well written, well thought out, and valid points considering the rhetoric of some of the presidential candidates.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I think, you know, ordinarily, the point is, ordinarily a person's religious beliefs are their own business. But when they make it everybody else's business, then we are quite justified in attempting to determine how that is going to affect their performance in the office that they seek.
And it affected, of course, the presidential campaign of John F. Kennedy when he became the first Catholic presidential candidate, to the point, and as you brought up in the last show, that he would have a certain fealty to the Bible, that he had to go give a speech saying that he's the president, he makes the decisions, and that the Vatican is not going to have any influence on United States policy. Right. So it's been addressed before, and now 30-some-odd years later, it's being addressed again.
And it's too bad we have to still be talking about this.
Yeah, so once again, no religious test for public office. I hope our candidates start to realize that, and I hope the voting electorate stops with the promotion of this kind of stuff.
When the electorate understands that that is superficial and not superficial, but irrelevant, but when imposed, it's dangerous. Mm-hmm. When the electorate understands that, then we will have made then the politicians will line up, because then it won't be to their advantage to use that.
Well, wasn't it down in Louisiana? Cecil Bothwell, an atheist, won an election, and they tried to get him thrown out because he had no religious belief. They were, in fact, imposing a religious test on him.
All right, we're throwing us out.
Okay, once again, on behalf of myself, Ron Barrier,
Dennis Horvitz,
we thank you for joining us here at the Atheist Viewpoint. Please visit the American Atheist website at atheist.org and subscribe to AA News. We have a magazine quarterly that goes out filling you with the latest information, and it also will help you in your social media by tying you in with atheists and non-believers in your area. And hopefully we do have events, local events around the country, and of course our national events, which we will be making announcements pretty soon. Also in the weeks to come, hopefully I've been informed that you will start to see some technical improvements and our rather low budget, austere programming. But the message is still the same no matter how we get it out there. We just don't have the multi-million dollars in the tax breaks that the religious get, so we don't have modern sound stages and
will you take a check?
High-tech technology. So on behalf of Dennis and myself and the Atheist Viewpoint, we bid you good night till next time.